If you had to tattoo one piece of customer acquisition advice, what are you tattooing?
But I actually did get a tattoo of this.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
In the sauna, people literally got out when I got in because I look like an absolute...
Oh no.
Because the tattoo blurred slightly. I hated it. It was like weeks of like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm so glad I didn't. Yeah, anyway.
You're like, no, I'm just a marketer, I swear.
Yeah, I just, a guy trying to get more engagement on social media. So there you go.
Oh my goodness.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, where we sit down with the brightest minds in the business to dig into all of their process secrets and best practices to help you continuously improve and level up the work that you're doing. So I'm stoked about our guest today, Marc Thomas, a marketer with a whole bunch of experience growing B2B SaaS businesses. He also runs the popular Positive Human blog, which is awesome. So definitely, if you're listening, go check that out. But we're so excited to have you. Welcome to Inside the Process, Marc.
Ah, cool. Thanks. What an intro. That was nice. Thanks, Mallory.
All right, Marc. Rinse and repeat kind of sounds like dirty laundry instructions, but we know that that's not what we're talking about today. In fact, it's a framework that you developed over the years to attract new customers, and it's called Rinse and Repeat for a reason. You've had a lot of success with it across many business ventures, so I'm hoping you can tell us today, how does it work?
Sure. Well, I think super important to understand is that the way that we've done marketing in the last sort of 10, 15 years has been very much about performance marketing, but that is becoming so much harder now. It's so much harder to grow a business by looking at the incremental gains in marketing ROI. There's technical problems. There's privacy problems in terms of literally you can't track people in the way that you used to be able to, which helped us do a lot of that stuff. There's the problem of AI. There's market problems. It's a whole red ocean, and we don't want to play in that. So Rinse and Repeat is basically a framework that I created, which helps us get away from the playbooks that we always used in marketing for the last sort of 15 years. And the goal is not to give people specific steps to actually go, I have to work within these, but to kind of free them from that by giving them some much broader steps and saying okay, well, here's what the whole process could look like, and you fill in the blanks. So yeah.
I love that. It really gives space for creativity. Sometimes when we talk about process, people get in this place of everybody's going to be robots doing the same thing. And it's no, your process is really meant to set this foundation of the steps that you should follow, and everybody brings their own magic to it. So walk me through what each of the rinse and repeat steps are.
Sure. Well, look, rinse and repeat is a sort of an acronym, really. So or not an acronym. What am I saying here? What is that?
I think it's an acronym. That's right.
It's an acronym?
I think so.
Kind of, yeah. Not all the letters are included, so I'm wondering whether it's a true acronym. But look,
it's close enough.
Let's break out of the box a bit. So rinse and repeat. So RIN. So that stands for relate, ideate, narrate. Then the S and E are there just because I'm a marketer and I like nice ways to package things. And then repeat on the end is about repeating this whole process. What is relate? What is ideate? What is narrate? Let's just cover those off quickly. So the first thing to know is that relate is about working hard to get uncomfortably close to customers and to understand the wider market as well. So the goal here is to basically get away from we should do this because it's always the way that we've done it, and instead go, look, our customers are all over the place. They're maybe not in the places that they used to be. Maybe they are, but it's harder to reach them. There's all sorts of competition. And we're basically saying, look, instead of trying to get this playbook-based approach in front of them with our message, we're saying let's stop and we'll start by understanding our customers on a deep level. So that's relate. And there's ideate, which is about using those insights to produce unique and novel campaign and growth systems. that are not based on the classic channel playbooks. We can talk about what that looks like in reality a bit. The third thing is then narrate. So that is realizing that we're basically no longer able to just point to an analytics report and say, hey, job done, my marketing investment is a success. Post-playbook marketing basically requires you to build this narrative about the ROI of your work, and it combines qualitative and quantitative data to actually show a much richer picture of marketing ROI. And then finally, repeat is basically, you're going to have to do this over and over and over again. There's no system because it's always going to be different every time you run through this loop. And that's exciting because it, as you said just then, it's like people think of systems as restrictive sometimes or like automatic and that kind of thing. But actually, this is a system for creativity. It's a system to kind of break out of that automaton way of doing things.
You took the words out of my mouth. I literally said this is a system for being creative effectively. That's what was going through my mind as you were talking.
Oh, cool. Well, hey, just send me the invoice, anytime I use it, you'll get a royalty. So
fantastic. Pleasure doing business with you. All right. So you said uncomfortably close to your customers, and my spidey senses went off on that one. I said, ooh, you got to tell me more about this. How do you get uncomfortably close to your customers? What does that look like?
Well, I'll tell you a story that as many business owners listen to this may be able to relate and maybe wince a little bit because it reminds them of themselves. I was in the same boat once too. A couple of years ago, I worked with a client who had a marketing problem, and the answer was not obvious to this problem. And I said to the CEO of this company, hey, can you get your team to please share any customer research that they have with me? And he said, sure, I'll go and get the folder. Let me find this folder. And he had to go back 3 years in his files to find the folder. And he said, yeah, we did our customer research 3 years ago. And I was like, oh, I think I found your problem. The problem is you have not got an up-to-date understanding of how your customers actually live their day-to-day lives. Now, maybe you understand their problem from 3 years ago, but markets move. Challenges come up all the time, What were you doing 3 years ago? Probably like stressing about COVID, right? You're not anymore. And that's a great illustration of like the things that consumed your headspace day to day 3 years ago and not the things that consume your headspace today. And yet it's common, very common to find that when you think about what you know about your customers, you'll rely on things that maybe you heard 3 years ago that you've been repeating in the same board meetings or pitch meetings or whatever it is for 3 years. And your customer has changed, as have you. So working hard to get uncomfortably close is about saying, look, we're going to do these interviews for sure. We're going to get up to date kind of word of mouth. So we get directly from the customer's mouth interviews. But also, we're going to look at product data. What have they been doing with our product? We're going to look at all sorts of different things. We'll look at different sources like survey data. We'll pull all that together in the same place and then get a kind of an understanding of how they've done that stuff over time. We might look at, if we've got a software product, in-app surveys or screen recordings or website analytics, all that kind of stuff. And that's just your customer. That's not the market. That is the specific person that is buying from you. And if you are able to get those insights, and maybe from your sales team or your sales tapes or whatever it is that you're doing, if you're able to get those insights, you will pull out of those things interesting points that maybe other people would not be able to get access to because they don't have your customers. But you want more people like your customers, right? So if you are able to take those insights, those kind of things, those ways of relating to your customer and use them in a meaningful way, then that could be huge for your business. And it's such a low-hanging fruit. Your competitors are not doing this.
And two that I feel like aren't on your list that I have personal experience with as like this, ex-ops person turned marketer is review campaigns and socials. I feel like businesses dump so much money into like these review campaigns and getting reviews. and into socials and social media ads and growing their socials. And then they're not listening to like what people are saying out there on those platforms. And one of the first things I did when I came on to Trainual was systematize our review process, like making sure that that information gets back to the product team, back to the customer success team, and then also like our marketing team, and everybody's aware of like what people are saying. And so I think there are a lot of stones probably left unturned in businesses where people can join those conversations and hear what folks are saying.
Yeah. Someone get Mallory that raise. That's exactly what you want, right? People who can do that in reality. And if you're the business owner, you want people like that around, because understanding customers is effectively the first point in making a product that people want. And when you make a product that people want, you can sell it to them easily and you can profit, and you can buy that yacht or whatever it is you want to do with all the money that you're sitting on after that.
I'm jotting that one down. Chris owes me a yacht.
Yeah, fine. Happily. You want an example of this?
Fantastic. I would love it. Let's hear it.
So my company Podia, the company I work for, we make a product where it's like an all-in-one tool for businesses of one. Now, that includes a website builder, email marketing, and also a way to sell digital products. So like downloads or courses or webinars, that kind of thing. When we researched what it is that people were doing, and we were diving into our customers, and we have a very kind of robust system in place for actually gathering all of this insight. One of the things that we discovered was that people don't always, they're buying from such niche, they're building such niche audiences. Some of them, they're huge niches, like you can build, hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue off them, but they're small enough that most people don't care about them. So they are being inspired by people in the similar niches to them on social media, right? So they have these kind of aspirational figures, and there are people similar to them within their own audience who also have these kind of inspirational or aspirational kind of views of our users. So that's one thing. And we would never be able to reach those audiences with, say, an ad campaign, because how do you target, somebody who, I don't know, makes balloon animals in Spain? Like, it's not something that ad platforms have as targeting, and yet it's a huge audience, amazingly. So that's an example. And then the second thing that we learned while we were doing this is that when people are trying to launch a product, or they're trying to like get their website or their newsletter online, it's a creative activity. And at a certain point, they often feel like they run out of juice, right? They run out of this kind of creative juice and they hit this wall. So those are these kind of two insights that when you hear them sound obvious. It's hard for us to reach niche audiences when we just rely on platform-based targeting, that kind of thing. And B, people who want to launch something often hit a wall in that process. Now, there is nothing there that makes us like just basically be able to sell our product directly. On the other hand, if we wanted to reach people who have an aspirational view of themselves, they want to build an audience of, I don't know, balloon animal, modelers, artists, whatever it is. I'm using that because that's an actual example of somebody who we worked with, not because I just pulled it out of the air. We would never be able to do that. But there are people out there who do want to build those audiences. So that's kind of the relation part of this. Why I'm telling you all of this is because I think it really lights up the next bit of that process, which is ideate, right? Now, the goal of ideation is to come up with unique and novel ways to reach your ideal customer with campaigns and messaging that really get drawn from that kind of relate segment of the process. So one thing that we decided to do was we realized that basically we wanted to sell to a very broad audience. They have very niche interests. We couldn't reach them. So we decided to basically go to our user base and find users with large social media audiences. Large in the sense of not like the influencers that you see, it's not like we're selling to Logan Paul or whatever. I can't think of any other, Mr. Beast, that guy. It's people who have niche large audiences. we have so many of these people who nobody else cares about except for us, because they are our customer and they have huge numbers of people in their audience who also could be our customer. So we decided to basically go and sponsor these people and build a kind of a sponsorship program where we would literally find them from our user base, offer them the ability to kind of make money from their audience in an additional way by, selling us a sponsorship. And we would let them create a piece of content that was basically just go wild, do what your audience actually cares about, not what we want you to do. We don't want you to just read an ad. We want you to create something that would be useful to them, even if we don't get any users from it. Make something that people would love us for because they love you, right? So we had this one show, which we discovered, which is the whole food plant-based cooking show. Now, I don't see many software companies sponsoring whole food plant-based cooking shows because, again, we care deeply about them because they're full of people who are our ideal customer. They have an audience full of these people. In fact, they have 367,000 people following them on YouTube, which is a huge niche, right? Now, we would never have gone after those people before. But because they make recipes on their blog and they record things about the recipes that are from food companies, they supply ingredients to them, who basically look, we have this insight about our customers, which is that they often hit this wall and they run out of creative juice. So why don't you make a purple, which is our company colors? Why don't you make a recipe for a purple energy smoothie, basically, a creative juice? And they did. And it was cool. It was very cool to see somebody basically create this unique piece of content for us that they put out to their audience who we would never have reached, that would stand alone even if Podia wasn't mentioned as a good piece of content that their users would watch. And the reason that we wanted that is because actually their users did watch, and they did listen to a segment in there about how the whole food plant-based cooking show uses Podia for their business. And so we went from this kind of this kind of customer research that is often quite abstract to a very concrete campaign. And we supplied these kind of insights to a bunch of different people and basically helped kind of creators who we worked with to deliver really interesting, novel campaign ideas on our behalf in a way that we would never have been able to do if we had just gone and said hey, Molly May, shoot us an ad or whatever, So that's a kind of a thing in action.
I love something you said. You said, make something people will love us for because they love you. And I want people to just stop and absorb that for a second, because I think that's just an incredible line. And it's something that's been so important to me overseeing our influencer program, which is a brand new pilot program for us at Trainual, because I think there is so much importance in the authenticity piece of that relatability, the R that you're talking about. And that content that's created for the brand should stand alone as good content for that creator. And I think about a lot of times I have this joke with my boss and I say, man, every time I share my dirty laundry on LinkedIn, my post takes off.
Yeah.
And I shared something pretty personal about how when I started at Trainual as an ops person turned marketer, I kind of went through a little bit of, an identity crisis, which I think was pretty natural to do. And we went through this whole process together of, figuring out what my role should look like, delegating things that I wasn't passionate about, taking on new responsibilities that I was passionate about. It was this whole exercise. And then we came out with the delegation planner, which is a product of Trainual, which basically allows us to much more seamlessly do that exact same thing, with a boss, or if you're, hiring a new role, whatever the case may be. And I shared this deeply personal story about the identity crisis that I went through with my boss. It was just a great piece of content. And then at the end of it, I said, by the way, the delegation planner helped me to do this, much more seamlessly, or whatever the story was. And that thing took off. I mean, it was seen by over 100,000 people. It had thousands of engagements. And it was essentially kind of an ad. Yeah. But if I would have taken out the delegation planner call out at the bottom, it would have easily stood alone as just a great piece of relatable content. And so I love what you're saying, because I've also done partnerships with folks that just don't understand that. And they try so hard to create like this ad that feels very misplaced. And then there's like no engagement on it whatsoever, because it feels like an ad and it feels very fake.
Yeah, definitely.
I also wrote down that we need to work with more creators who are cooks and create recipes, because I think there's like a process thing in there. And also I'm a big foodie, so I'm like, there's something here. I'm gonna make it happen.
Well, there you go. The whole food plant-based cooking show are you guys. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm quitting the podcast and I'm becoming a cooking show for Trainual. That's it.
Nice.
All right. So let's get real for a second. There are very few companies with memorable campaigns, and they're often these big brands that already have mega audiences like, Pepsi or McDonald's or somebody like that. And they can really afford to take big risks and swing and miss. And I think about Trainual, and when we switched our marketing strategy over to memes and trending reels, and at first it was very scary. It was the idea of our CMO, and I just was not sure about it at all. But the play has had major benefits for us. But obviously there's no one strategy that works for every business. And social media can often be this land of like never ending scrolling and cat videos and just like mind numbing things. And so how do you manage to kind of cut through all the chaos and the noise and actually get people to, one, pay attention, and two, relate to what you're sharing with or without the funny factor enough to drive interest in your product or your service or whatever it is that you're trying to sell?
I think like you mentioned risk there. The thing about this is that a lot of people will never do anything different because they're afraid that they will get it wrong, right? Now you realized that. You realized that there was the potential that, and like, I mean, maybe on some level you didn't express this, but I'm betting that there was a moment where you thought, if we do this and it goes wrong, will I get fired?
Oh, of course.
Right? You're not alone. And if you're a business owner, which I was once, there's also this panic of like, if I do something different and it goes wrong, like, A, I'm not going to be able to manage to keep this business afloat, maybe. And B, people's perception of me will be different if I fail publicly.
And also, I think like you invest your own money as a business owner, and it's like, what if I lose my life savings on taking this swing?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of risk, both to your kind of financial status, but also your reputational status, right? When I was a business owner, I actually felt like that as well. I know something is not going right in my company. It was a software company. I know we're not growing as fast as I wanted us to grow. It felt like we were kind of trudging along through kind of treacle, like molasses, I guess, maybe in the US. Anyway, and I was like, something's got to change. And then when I thought about what needed to be done, I thought to myself, that's such a big change that when it goes wrong, as it probably will, I will, A, be judged. I had investors at that point. I didn't want to be judged by my investors too hard. And also, like, people's perception of me as like a bright young business prospect will change because they'll see, oh, this guy actually can't do it. He'll have failed in public. And for me, that was huge. To the extent that I did something so stupid, which was I didn't do anything. I was so worried about failing that I didn't do anything to stop myself failing. And my thought was all along, if I fail by doing the same thing as everybody else, at least when I fail, I'll have been able to say, well, it wasn't my fault. It was, I did what you meant to do and it failed. Rather than I took a bold step and it failed and I learned this, but I maybe succeeded, right? And that's like that experience of abject failure because I was so scared of failing. It literally changed how I see business as a whole. And it's one of the reasons that now I think to myself, look, there has to be a way that we can take these risks in a way that is managed. And so that is why I think it is so important to lean on customer insight, because you can do things if you've got deep understanding of your customer that seem like madness to other people. If you really understand your market and you understand your customer, you know how they are likely to respond to a campaign or to a change in your business model or a change in the structure of the company or whatever it is. This is not about taking big risks. This is about risk management. And you are going to have the risk of failure, no matter whether you do nothing or you do something. My take is that the fear of failing because we do nothing is much less than the fear of failure for doing something, right? But the chances of success are incrementally greater by doing something different than they are by doing the same thing as everybody else. Because the same thing as everyone else is diminishing in ROI very fast in marketing. And it will only become more acute at a much faster rate, especially as AI takes hold in the marketplace.
Ugh. I feel like we could just end right there. Like, that is just such a good word that folks really need to like latch onto. It made me think a lot about like how I compete in my sport, which is jiu-jitsu. And for the longest time, I was so scared to compete because I was scared to let my coaches down. Sometimes that's in business, your investors, right? The people who've invested money and time into you. And I was just like, man, I can't show up and lose. I can't risk, them seeing me, not as strong or athletic or as skilled as I want them to. And I had a coach once say, the fact that you even show up and step on the mat puts you in a different league. And I think that's just like so true of people who are willing to take risks and try new things. It puts you in a different league of business than anyone else that's around you. And it's just such a good mindset to have, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur.
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be wildly different in terms, you don't have to be kind of kooky, right? That's what a lot of people do. A lot of people think, I've got to do something different. So I'm going to dress the CEO in a chicken suit and have him do the company quarterly.
That actually sounds fantastic. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, let me tell you this. Chicken suits cost $20 on Amazon. I know because I checked. Anybody can do the chicken suit thing. Yeah. Anybody can create a podcast where they eat hot wings. Anybody can, send artisanal beer to somebody as a gift. But just a slight bit of difference, a slight differentiator that really matters to your customer can make a huge difference. So let me give you another concrete example of that in action. When I was working at a marketing agency in my last role, I was selling to effectively the VP of marketing at, companies between like $10 and $100 million annual revenue. And the economy crashed. And suddenly all of those people were having to lay off their teams. They were being asked to make cuts. And all of our agency's marketing was basically, the messaging was, hey, you're doing your marketing wrong. We can help you do it better. And I started talking to customers and sort of realizing, flip, these people are having potentially the worst year of their lives. They're having to let go of all of their friends because, software is often quite a friendly industry. They're having to fire their friends because they've been told by their investors they have to. I'm not going to be the person who says now, hey, you're doing your marketing wrong when they are literally, having emotional trauma. And so I thought to myself, what should we do about this? And I decided that I would make all of my content about trying to make people laugh. Not because I think it's the best way to get to people. I don't. But I thought, these people are having a terrible year. They probably want someone to cheer them up rather than tell them they're terrible. And so I started making the same sort of content that I always made about marketing and software marketing, but I did it through the medium of dance punk music. And I started shooting music videos in a post-punk style, original songs, and just generally having a good time on LinkedIn. And I put them out there. And the first one I did, I was nervous. I was really nervous because I thought, man, this is what gets me fired, because it's so different. It's so like reputationally risky. But again, I was just like, well, actually, you know what? There is this insight about customers, which is they're having a terrible time. They probably want to laugh. And by the way, if you're at VP level today, high chance that you grew up with post-punk music all around you. And so just doing that, it turns out people love it. And in the last 2 years, my personal kind of brand and my audience engagement has just skyrocketed in a way that I just couldn't have predicted. And, you know, I've carried on doing that, releasing those little pieces of music. I even released some on Spotify. And it's not something that someone else could just go and do now to the same effect. They can certainly produce a piece of music, but it's a novelty rather than like, this person gets me more than other people. And, you know, you can be kooky, sure, if it relates to what your customers actually need. You could be deadly serious and do it differently. It doesn't really matter. The key thing is, like, what does your customer need? And what do you know about them that makes them feel like you are the best person for understanding them in the business?
Yeah, in the business and in that moment, relating to what they need in the moment. And I think it goes back to a lot of what you were talking about with people not doing enough analysis regularly, you know, it being 2 years or 3 years time. And you're literally saying you were aware of what they needed in that moment and were able to provide it to them. And since have pivoted and incorporated other things based on what their needs are. But earlier we said, you know, uncomfortably close. And I kept thinking like, you're empathetically close at this point. And I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's closer than it's normal to get in business, right? You know, on my website, I joke that, you know, someone might be the VP of sales. They might buy $150 million of software or whatever, but they're also like walking their dog on the beach and are also into leather in their spare time, you know? Like, it's uncomfortable. Like, no one else would, I mean, I don't know if any of my people are into leather, maybe. But like, it's uncomfortable. It's the sort of stuff that when you know that, you can make the kind of reference, you can make the pop culture reference, you can use that kind of aesthetic, you can use that style of communication in a way that no one else can because they don't know that, you know, they like that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, speaking of leather, those Wish ads, those get uncomfortably close, my friend. Uncomfortably close. Not cool.
Do you feel like maybe, like, as a society, not mine and yours, Mallory, our desires are like way less weird than we think that they are, and that really someone at Wish has just gone, no, these are like the 5 common desires that people have, and I'm going to make weird products related to them?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think like there is a requirement to work at Wish that you have to be like a little chaotic. All right. So I feel like we've really hit the mark here on relate and ideate. And narrate is so interesting to me in the way that you use that terminology, because in marketing, we love to hate numbers. Mm-hmm. And they're so important to everything that we do.
Yeah.
And I know you've said too that you're not like the biggest fan ever of spreadsheets and having to work in data. So I'm curious what kind of quantitative data you think is worth looking at, but more importantly, what qualitative signals you're interested in tracking, and how do you know your customer acquisition strategies are actually moving those two needles?
Well, I think actually, you know, I'm not sure. I actually really do like data. I'm very good at like thinking about the kind of the modeling of that stuff. But I will say, when it comes to talking about it, I definitely prefer a story. And really what I realized was, look, I don't know if people listening to this will be familiar, but like a couple of years ago, there was this horrible moment where Google said that they were going to discontinue the kind of the main analytics product that they had, that most people were using and liked, and replace it with a product, frankly, so bad.
Don't say GA4. Don't say it, okay? I'm going to have nightmares.
I won't say it. No, you'll have to bleep it out. But no, it started out as a great idea, turned into a horrible product. And they're about to like make it the only option. Anyway, at that point, suddenly everyone was like, what the heck do I do now to show the ROI of my marketing? And I thought to myself, wow, that is not the only way that I think we should be showing whether something we've invested in has worked. And this is like compounded again by those kind of technological and market changes, especially if you're going to be doing things as well in channels that don't have standard analytical tools. You need to build a narrative. And that narrative is a story that you can use to pull together key data points of a mix from a range of sources. So for example, ad platforms, web traffic, social engagement, community engagement, CRM data, self-reported attribution, community posts, social listening, and whatever else comes down, in the future that we don't know about yet. How I like to think about this is that you need to have things from all of those different kind of groups of things. Now, I built this little matrix. You can see it. We'll link to it, I'm sure. There is a matrix that I call the attribution matrix, very creative name. And it basically has these two axes, qualitative to quantitative, and then low confidence to high confidence. Now, each one of those segments contains a different kind of data point. So here are the quadrants, and I always have to look at this myself, so don't worry if you're not following along perfectly. The first one is key narrative, which is qualitative high confidence signals. So for example, self-reported attribution on calls, demos, and maybe form fields. But also sometimes your own gut feel, because you do have a better gut than you think you do. Supporting points, which are qualitative low confidence signals. For example, comments on social posts that say, wow, I'm going to sign up for X product after watching this or seeing this thing. Key reports, which are quantitative high confidence signals. So an example of that would be ad platform data. It's numbers, you've got a pretty good confidence level in it. And then supporting metrics, which is quantitative low confidence signals. So that could be stuff like engagement with email marketing, open rates, that kind of thing. Now, to really make an argument for your campaign, you actually have to have a mixture of those things. So, for example, let's go, that narrative reporting that you say I favored, fair point. I do like to use it to attribute stuff like sponsorships. So in addition to my kind of key narrative, which would be those qualitative high confidence signals, I'd put in key reports. So affiliate link tracking, that sort of thing. Supporting metrics, including traffic numbers related to landing pages within those campaigns to get a picture of what's working and what's not. So that's one kind of way that you might do that. Now, every campaign that you run at each different time is going to have a different attribution model, but you can make this a less risky investment by building in all sorts of different narratives. Because let's say I'm doing something in a community and I'm investing a lot of money into building a community or taking part in a community. Maybe I've sent all my sales reps there or something. How am I going to attribute that? Well, there is no analytics in a community product that I can look at if I'm, just joining in. But pretty quickly, if, maybe my team's profiles all point to a landing page that is specifically for that community, maybe I can measure the traffic on that. But I also want to combine it with the fact that maybe my sales reps had 20 different conversations with people who went on to buy because they said, we bought after speaking to, Jane or John or whatever. And so like building up these narratives is really vital right now because if you don't do it, you're probably going to lose out on a huge amount of value that you might otherwise have realized if you had just had a broader view of how your own marketing was performing. But B, frankly, like this is de-risking. This is saying like the things that you're investing in, which are like scary at the top, this is how you capture the value and report back and say, look what I did.
That's so cool. All right. So how comfortable would you be sharing that metrics with those that are listening today?
Sharing which metrics?
The matrix, I should say, not metrics.
Oh, the matrix. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, that's cool. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
All right, cool. So for those of you listening, you know that this show is based on going deep inside of a process, and then we give you that process so that you can implement it yourself in your business or among your teams. So we've got a super cool customer acquisition process coming out that we created in collaboration with Marc. We will make sure to include that matrix in there as well. But bringing us home here, Marc, I've got one last question for you, and it's this. Yeah. If you had to tattoo one piece of customer acquisition advice on a newbie entrepreneur's forearm, what are you tattooing?
Well, I don't know if you know this, Mallory, but I actually did get a tattoo of this.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. This was not planned, people. This was not planned.
Just said target customer pain points. But funny story, I joked that I would get this. And then a week later, I posted a picture on Twitter of it on my arm. It's right here in big black letter font. I don't know if you know what black letter is. Anyway. And firstly, everyone was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And kept messaging me to see oh my gosh, is that did he actually do this incredibly stupid thing? And fortunately, I didn't. It was a fake tattoo. I got it a real one made, but yeah, I tattooed it. Anyway, at the same time, it was just coming out of COVID and I had a shaved head and a black letter tattoo on my arm. And I don't know if is this a video podcast? This is how I look. And in the sauna, which I go to pretty much every day, people literally got out when I got in because I look like an absolute...
Oh no.
Because the tattoo, when I applied it, blurred slightly. And so it wasn't clear what I had written on my arm in big black letter. I hated it. It was weeks of oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm so glad I didn't. Yeah. Anyway.
You're like, no, I'm just a marketer, I swear.
Yeah, I'm just a guy trying to get more engagement on social media. So there you go.
Oh my goodness. Well, you are full of incredible stories and some that folks are going to have to ask you for after this podcast. Yep. I think you're just full of the wildest stories and so much fun to talk to. But that's all the time we have for today. So thank you so much for joining with us and partnering with us to create some of these customer acquisition resources and sharing just the wealth of knowledge that you shared. I think you're going to help so many businesses out there who are just kind of stuck in this inaction, which we know is the worst place that you can be. So hopefully people can get out there and start taking some action.
Sweet. Thanks so much. This has been very pleasant. I'll catch you soon.
All right. Thanks.